Welcome to Meet My Friends with Daddy Porter. I am Daddy Porter, Greg Washington, and I'm here with my friend, Kerri Allen. She goes by the Georgia Beer Wench. She's been drinking beer for a long time. She's very knowledgeable about beer. She's a beer judge. I think she's a beer scholar. I don't technically have that, but I think she is. um, she's assistant director of two big beer fests in Atlanta. Um, as I said, nice long history of beer. She appreciates you. We met her. I met her at the Beer Bloggers Conference in Montana. Right. Seems like I've known her longer than that. Um, and you guys know about how much I love Montana and all that. So we'll get to that rant and raving later. But without further ado, let me bring on my friend, Kerri.
Hi.
How you doing?
I am awesome. I'm getting my tummy all warm with my Somfian quadruple. This is a Somfian glass, by the way.
Oh.
When in Belgium, you have to have the right glass.
And have you ever been there?
To Belgium?
Yeah.
Oh, about 12, 13 times.
Well, I met have you been to the place that's on your glass?
Somfian, yes. 3 times. Toured a private tour by the owner with Owen and some friends of ours, and a couple times we took groups. Dominique, she is awesome.
Yes. And well, I'm kind of conflicted on this because we've had your longtime partner on, Owen Ogletree, and I love him to death, and I know you do too, obviously. But I didn't want to mention him because I want it to be your story, and he's a craft beer as far as writing and traveling and all that. He's just amazing. He's great. You already know. But I didn't want to mention him, and I even told him, I was like, I don't want to mention you, Owen, because I want it to be all about Kerri. But
it's hard. Our beer story is definitely entwined.
Right,
because
right.
he's actually the guy that got me into beer.
Right. So let's go back there. So where did your love of craft beer go? Because I love to say, people find craft beer. Sometimes it's the other way around, but normally people are searching or looking or want a higher quality. How did you come about?
Well, it had to do with just a couple of friends. I went to college in Decatur, Georgia, which now is a big beer area. We've got several breweries there, and brew pubs and some really good beer bars. Back when I was in college there, not so much, but we had a couple of clubs that had, a little venues that had places, and it was hanging out with friends. And when I met Owen, he asked me, one of the first things he asked me was, do you like beer? And I'm like, no. He goes, well, what have you had? And I said, well, Schlitz, my daddy used to drink, Lone Star, my boyfriends used to drink, Schaefer, all the yellow beer. And I'm like, that stuff just has no flavor. So, I'd rather drink tequila or bourbon or wine or something rather than do that. And he said, let's try one. And so he bought a Sam Adams Boston Ale. That was my very first beer. And I loved it. About a week later, I was drinking IPAs, if that says anything.
Right. I love that. I love that story because I feel that a lot when people say I don't like beer, and Owen had the perfect comeback. Like, what have you tried? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So he knew what to do, and it's a palate experience, as you already know. Mm-hmm. So you guys took that, and basically you took that into a love of hitting the road and finding beer, right?
Well, the hitting the road for beer came a little bit later, but yeah, we started hanging out. We started dating because at that point we weren't dating yet. We started dating, and we ended up eventually moving in together. And you may know this about Owen, and I am going to mention this because he does not do things. He can't get into something small. If he gets a passion, he goes for it. Fortunately, this particular passion I happen to agree with. We started homebrewing. And that was great because we made beer together. We made our own recipes. I also made wine. I made cider. I made mead because I like my full flavor spectrums. And so homebrewing was really where we really got into it, hanging out with friends. there was no real great beer, and was before the alcohol contents in Georgia were higher. So if you wanted a good barley wine, you had to make it. If you wanted a good Doppelbock, you had to make it. Or you had to bootleg it from Louisiana or somewhere where they didn't care. So yeah, it was the home brewing. And then Owen, I mean, we traveled when we first started dating, but it wasn't necessarily for beer. It was just because we liked to go. Our first trip together was Key West. There was no good beer in Key West back in 1994. Let me tell you that right now. But I don't know that there's much there now, but there may be a little bit more.
Right.
But, it started with the homebrew, and then he opened a homebrew shop, which when I actually went back to school, I graduated, went back to school to teach, and I worked in the homebrew shop while he was teaching, because he was teaching at the time, doing 2 jobs. So while I was in school, I actually worked the shop, which actually really honed. I had nothing to do all day but, study my stuff, read homebrew books, and talk to customers all day. And I think I developed my love of creating recipes and learning about beer styles and really getting a good base, so that when we started traveling around the world, we actually knew what we were getting. And it was fun because you're like, oh, I've heard about this beer. I've never had one. And it was great to go from there. And then we started doing group trips. We'd literally take a 14-passenger van every summer to New Orleans with some of our closest friends. And we would all come back with a case of beer that we could not get locally. So I don't know how legal that was at the time, but we did it. Ended up with a lot of good beer, which actually ended up where we got most of our Thomas Hardy's from the vertical Owen and I did recently. But yeah. So the traveling came a little bit later, partially with once I got a job and we could afford, and, that sort of thing. We've done most of our traveling in the last probably 15 years or so.
Wow. And so what's fascinating to me is, as a person who's I came up in the middle of the craft beer revolution, and the new wave, whatever you want to call it. I came really late. You guys were hanging out. I mean, were you guys home brewing before it was even legal? Because Jimmy Carter made it legal, and then that's what spurred, everybody says spurred people making home brew, and then, another domino is, the home brewers are now the brewers. So right. right.
Yeah. I mean, the law had already changed when we started home brewing, because there were already homebrew stores around. It wasn't that long ago.
Gotcha.
It was about 93, 94.
Gotcha.
It was funny too, because around that same exact time, and that's sort of when craft beer hit Georgia, some of it was really good, some of it wasn't. Everybody knows Sweetwater, which was one of our first Atlanta Brewing Company. Those were some of the ones. We have some that are now defunct, Marthasville, Dogwood, and some others that are no longer with us. But we also started writing about beer at the same time. So Southern Brew News, they started a franchise here in the Southeast, and both of us started working for them because we knew the editors, and they're like, hey, you guys can write, you guys know beer. So that's actually when the Beer Wench was born. I wrote from the Beer Wench's kitchen as a feature writer for Southern Brew News.
Oh, okay. And so that was the kitchen. So was it pairing, or was it you cooking with beer and food? Or
both. Well, I started off because at first they were trying to figure out where the paper was going. They knew it was Southeast because it was Southern Brew News. And when I first started writing, my first couple of articles were actually my first article was based on a trip to Watou, Belgium. We have a friend, Stefan, who owns the Hammerhof in Watou, Belgium. Fascinating human. I love Stefan. He does beer cuisine, has written several cookbooks. I have one which was finally translated into English that he signed for me. But I took one of his beer recipes and made it Southern and paired it with some beer. And I wrote the article about the trip, as well as what I did to kind of take his recipe and turn it into a Southern beer cuisine. And I did some of that for a while. And then I switched over to going to beer dinner, started to become a thing. And so more restaurants, more brew pubs, more breweries were starting to get that kind of, oh, well, we can have a whole another side of this. So I started getting recipes from chefs. Some of them were from beer dinners. Some of them were just, I would email, we know lots of chefs. We're both foodies as well. And so I started emailing everyone I could think of in the Southeast and going, hey, do you have a recipe that you really like that pairs really well with beer? One of my favorite recipes I got from Hugh Atkinson, who he's one of my favorite people. He owns 3 restaurants in Georgia, I think just 3. And they've been doing a lot of work during this time feeding people. He hasn't opened his restaurants back up yet at all. He's not ready, but they have been feeding the community in need as well as health workers and stuff. But he gave me it was a mushroom and pea risotto recipe that he absolutely loved. And I can't remember now what it was paired with. I think it might have been paired with a Saison at the time, or Vit beer. It would have been one of those 2 that would have gone well with. I'd have to go back into my archives. That was a long time ago. But so yeah, it started sort of as my creation, and then I started reaching out to the community, trying to get input from other people. And I've done a few other feature articles. I ended up leaving after a few years. I did that for several years. I had a artistic difference with the original owner of the paper. He no longer owns the paper, but and that's another story for another time. But he and I could not see eye to eye, and I said, well, I'm taking Beer Wench is mine. I'm taking Beer Wench with me. And I have written some stuff for Southern Brew News since then. I've also written for Southern Distinction. I've written for Beer Connoisseur, and obviously my own blog, beerwench.info. So
yeah, I was gonna say you write for this. So you were I like to say or I like the saying, which is you were doing beer pairings before it was cool.
Yes,
because it is cool. So I would assume that it was kind of harder to get the people to think that way, or am I wrong back then?
Well, in the beer community, not so much. But if you were going to if you were doing a beer dinner and you had wine people, and I'm not dissing on wine people because I've got a cellar full of wine as well. I love wine.
Oh yeah, you're wine.
I tend not to eat with it though.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't think wine pairs as well with food. And I know there are plenty of chefs that would argue with me with that, and that's fine. But getting people outside the hardcore beer community to say, really, you're going to pair a whole dinner with different beers? I'm like, well, yeah. And it was talking them through the flavors, and there's more flavors of beer than there are of wine.
Yep.
But the basic premise behind it is the same. And once you have people do it, they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And that was the beer pairing was one of the last things that I quote got about craft beer and all that. I was skeptical going in. I was just like, yeah, just give me my beer. And I'm like, man, there's many different flavors. That's great. And it just doesn't connect. But I went to one, I was like, oh, I'll just go, because the food actually brought me to the pairing more than the beer. Because I'm like, oh, I'll go for the food. That sounds really good. You know what I mean? So then when you sit there and then you have somebody talk to you, again, if anybody who's listening to me never been to a beer pairing, you need to go. You needed to go yesterday. Obviously, it's COVID. So, and I don't know, if you're in Georgia, we might be able to do something for you. But it's COVID, so you do what you have to do there. But once we really get back to hopefully at least somewhat semblance of a normal, you need to, excuse my language, get your ass to a beer pairing. It is so amazing, especially if it's done right, or not done right, but if the pairings hit you right. Some pairings are going to hit people differently, different palates. But a lot of times, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, but a lot of times people who make these pairings, they do it in a way that it could touch as many people as possible, or you make them broad enough that it's not just about your palate, Kerri. It's about everybody else. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, because I don't know if people understand all that.
Well, I do, and it's funny because if you've ever, and most people have paired wine with cheese, right? Cheese is a really good example. But we've actually sat down and done beer and cheese pairings, tons of them. We did them in our own home before anyone was doing them out. food changes the flavor of the beverage, and beverage changes the flavor of the food. They complement or contrast with one another. I mean, that's the whole idea of beverages with meals. So you can have somebody say one of the courses is an IPA, and you've got somebody there who hates IPAs. They don't like hops. Oh my God, it's bitter. I'm going to hate this. But if it's paired with the right food and complements the right thing, they may go, okay, actually, I like this IPA with this dish. I can do this. And it kind of opens up their palate to things they didn't think about before, because we put ourselves in little ruts. You get to a style, and I love drink. Now I have favorite styles, don't get me wrong, but I drink the kaleidoscope of beer because I'm fascinated by all the beer. A few styles right now I'm not so fascinated with anymore. But when it comes to general classic styles, I like to try them all. So it actually opens up people's minds to say, okay, maybe I don't just like stouts, or I don't just like Kolsch's. Maybe I can go somewhere else because they have something that actually makes it palatable for them.
Yeah. And here's a story I know you can relate to. We were at the Beer Bloggers Conference in Montana, and they had a cheese lady come in, and she had her own app. And then they proceeded to. We also had the Chimay guy there, and so wait. There was two different pairings, right? We had a Chimay.
Yeah, there was the Chimay one with and I think it was just the one cheese with a couple of the different pairings, and then there was the one the cheeses. I still have the app on my phone. I use it. Yeah, I love that app. I think it's Cheeses of Europe. We've actually done we've ordered cheeses based on that app before. So we have a company we go to get some fun cheeses, and but yeah, and I think it was like 4 or 5 different cheese. We had I remember that big old cheese board that was so much cheese.
Right. And
all the different beers.
Right. And what I found there too, because there was I'm mistaken it too. We had the Chimay, and then Chimay had their own cheese that they brought with it, and that was whoo. But anyway, that was real. I mean, that was amazing. But the other presentation, and then they had Julia was leading the presentation, and that one really, really hit me hard. And I was a fan of pairing before, but that little session really hit me hard because we had different beer and we had different cheese, and then just the way Julia was explaining it about how some of them hit harder on different people, and then that's when I really understood the simplicity, but also the complexity of beer and food pairing. And that's what, because some of them were just like in your mouth, it was like it was fireworks. It was like, wow, these two mesh. You can tell you can tell how they taste when they're different, but when you put them together, it's just a whole different. I mean, it's really, really, when it's laid out to you in that fashion, it's hard to not only deny the science, it's hard to deny just the results. It really is. It's almost a thing I can't explain it to you. You just have to go through it yourself.
You have to kind of go into it with an adventurous spirit. You can create your own pairings and test things out. There's a lot of different places you can Google to find pairings. You can also go onto some of my archived articles that have recipes and give you some pairings as well. But because sometimes you're going to have the perfect pairing and you're going to think, oh my God, this is great. And then your next one might be a train wreck. Based on either your palate or whoever's making the pairing didn't understand the flavors. And I think that's where beer and food combine, because you have to know your flavors. Even if you don't know the beer language, if you know the food language, they relate, because you have tart and salty and sweet and all of those types of flavors within food, and you have them within beer as well. So I think that as long as you go into it with an adventurous spirit and go, I'm going to give this its full due, then I think you'll have fun with it. Even if you occasionally get a pairing that's not to your liking, you'll go, I can see what was meant by this.
Yes.
And you have a way to go from there.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I learned in Montana. And it was funny too, because I'm not really I used to say I didn't like cheese, especially I used to always say I like only melted cheese. and that really changed my the way I look about cheese too, and the way I actually feel about it. It actually what it comes down to, Kerri, is just more of a texture thing. Like I don't like some cheeses textures, whether it be cottage cheese on one end or really hard cheese on the other end. I just was not used to the texture. Once I got used to it, and that pairing there helped me. I was literally texting my family that we're going to be doing more cheese plates. And I came home and I used the plate that, or the nice wood that we got, and we've been doing at least 2 cheese plates a month. My family loves it. I love it. So it's just great. It's one of those things that once you find it, you're like, damn, that's excellent. So
suggestion.
Yes, just go on. Yep.
If you haven't done this yet, because now you said it's a texture thing, so I don't know if this is a cheese that gives you issues. Camembert. If you can find it unpasteurized, is the best. But in the States, we have that problem with getting unpasteurized cheeses. But Camembert, which is usually made, obviously, in the Camembert region of France, which is in Normandy. Normandy, France is also cider region. One of the best tastings, one of the best pairings is Camembert and a really good dry cider. If you can get a French Camembert, that's fantastic because obviously they know their Camembert. It is a stinky cheese and it is a soft cheese. So if either of those things mess with your palate, you might have trouble getting beyond it. But with the right cider, it pulls apple flavors out of the cheese. It also cuts through the richness because Camembert is a very rich, creamy cheese. And it cuts through that. And that is actually one of my favorite beer pairings with cheese. I love it.
Wow. Excellent. So we were going chronologically. I'm going to get back to that in a second. While we're here at beer pairings, one of the most fascinating things I heard out of Owen when I was talking to him is about you guys are participating in curbside to go food and beer pairings. So I need to hear more about this because it's fascinating, and how you're going to get one up to me in Wisconsin.
I wish I really could, Greg. You would totally have appreciated these. We are blessed where we live. We live in a little burb of Athens called Watkinsville. It's not in the same county, but it's close enough. We have a great restaurant called Chops and Hops. It's been struggling. They're a small, locally owned business, and he actually owns a couple of businesses. He owns another one down the road called Butcher and Vine. But trying to find ways to bring product, not just food, but also beer, to help local breweries. Andrew came up with this idea of doing beer pairings or food pairings at home, where his chef Ariel would create these beer dinners, and then he contacted. He'd actually run it by me originally because he knew that was my jam, and said, "Kerri, what do you think about me giving you a menu and you and Owen coming up with some beers?" We were trying to keep it as local as possible, like Georgia, but we did branch out a little bit. And you get doing the pairing, and then people could actually come up, get their food and the beer to go, and take it home. And we're like, well, that's kind of cool. And so we did the first one, not having a clue what was going to happen. Ariel is an amazing chef. She's very creative. And what we did was kind of went through local distributors. We were trying to give everyone some love, because everybody was hurting. And we did. We paired the food and the beer, and then we did videos. So there's a bunch of videos on YouTube of us talking about these meals. Obviously, we weren't eating them as we were talking because that would have taken too long. But we were talking about the ingredients and how they paired with the beers that we chose. And I will say that 99% of them worked really well. Usually when I've done beer dinners and things before, I've talked with the chef. I've sat in person with the chef, But it helps that Owen and I are both foodies, so we understand what things taste like. And so we were going, okay, well, this is what this should taste together. And then we would go, well, what beers do we know that are available? And then we would have to call the distributor and go, okay, what do you have?
Wow.
And we go, okay, that would work. So, and then we ended up doing, I think we did 5 of them. And it was brilliant. And they were able to get interest for the people who weren't interested in doing the family meals or whatever. It made it something fun. A lot of people did it for like a special date night. And they also did a wine version, I have to say. So if they were, you didn't get 4 wines, I think it was a little bit more expensive, and I think you might have gotten 2 bottles with that, rather than having 4 beers, 1 for each course. But yeah, it was brilliant. I was really surprised at how efficient, how well it worked, and that Ariel kept coming up with these new ideas every week. So it made it really different.
Wow. Yep. And my friend Mari says it's awesome. And yeah, Mari, if you're still watching, I'm not sure if you want to comment, but I don't know if I've seen anything like this around here. If I have, I would absolutely would jump in. I know we have a couple breweries doing. I know we had a brewery do a cheese and a beer pairing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen a full
course.
So,
it helps with Chop. Now, Chop, I will say this about a lot of our local restaurants. They've been doing beer dinners for years. We have a very strong beer community here in Georgia, and Athens is no exception to that. And so they've done in-house beer dinners and wine dinners. In fact, they took a page out of Sam Caglioni's book and did beer and wine tastings with meals. Because he and Marnie wrote the book. He said, she said, he said beer, she said wine. And they have done those where they paired a wine and a beer with a course and let people decide. 9 times out of 10, the beer wins. Which, we already know. Yeah. Just because of the way the flavors work, wine is very acidic, so you have to be really careful what you pair it with. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So our restaurants have had a lot of practice at doing them in-house. So I think it was just a matter of setting up the logistics and then getting the word out there that that's what they're doing. Gotcha. And that's kind of where Owen and I came into play. We're like, well, these beers would go really good, and these companies make really good beer, so we know we can trust that they'll have some quality stuff. And Ariel's done beer dinners before. And so it was just getting the logistics of putting them together. It was fabulous. I wish, and because they are a restaurant, not a brewery, it's easier. A brew pub can do it easier because they have a kitchen. If a brewery doesn't have a kitchen, then they actually have to partner up with somebody, and that tends to be a little bit more. It's been done lots, but it does take a little bit more work, especially at a time when you're not mixing and mingling as much.
Right. And as I said too, having you and Owen, they're willing and able to say, hey, we'll pitch in and help. That takes a lot off the plate of the brewery who's already trying to do 600,000 things to stay, afloat during COVID. So, that's probably, hey, Owen, that's probably.
Hey. He's bringing me another beer.
Yeah, look at that. So, Mari agrees with me. She hasn't seen any of these beer tastings here, or these to go curbside food things here. And yes, she's right. It is a shame. So was there one last question about this? Was the food hot, or did you have to warm it up?
Most of the time we picked it up late enough that once we did the video, we could actually go through and eat. Some of the courses were actually meant to be served cold.
Oh, okay.
There are some things that you could warm up if you wanted to or not. It worked out really well. And I will say this too, because we had to actually, they were clamoring, Andrew got a lot of clamoring for a carnivore meal. He did a lot of seafood and other stuff, but chicken and seafood, but some people were wanting carnivore. And so that is actually something that Owen and I do not eat. We have not eaten mammal in 26 years. But what we have been doing for years since going to beer tastings is chefs are pretty good. Not all of them, but most chefs are willing to substitute. And so Chops and Hops has always been one of those that was always willing to substitute and are very good about not changing the flavor profile.
Gotcha.
So in the carnivore meal, for example, one of the things that was served was, I think it was a filet mignon, but they used Impossible meat for us, Impossible burger for us. So texture was different, but the toppings and all of that were the same. So you don't lose flavor, because what you don't want to do in a substitution is substitute something completely different, because then you throw the pairing out the window.
Right.
And most people can eat everything, but every once in a while you'll have somebody, and the only reason we don't, it's been so long that we actually can't. It started as a choice, and then now we don't have a choice. So
right.
Yeah, I found that out the hard way. I tried something that I shouldn't have because I wanted to taste it, and it made me very ill. So I won't do that again.
That'll learn you.
Yep. But it looked so good.
Oh, I feel you. I didn't know that you guys were so do you are you I actually didn't know that you guys were vegetarians.
Not vegetarian. Our diet is probably, especially right now, 80% vegetarian, but we eat seafood and we eat bird. So chicken, duck, turkey, and we eat seafood. And in fact, that seafood is the one thing I could actually give up bird in a heartbeat. I don't think I can give up my seafood.
Okay. So is that pescatarian? I don't know. I'm getting in the weeds.
Yeah, there's so many labels. I don't know.
Right. Whatever works for you, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. That's a beautiful. I love the glass. Love the glass.
Isn't it pretty?
Oh man,
beautiful. I love that is, and I'm sure you do too by now, because the downfall of most beer hobbyists is you end up with an extraordinary amount of beer glasses.
Yes.
We've had the delight of having a lot of ours come from around the world, but
beautiful. Yeah. So what do you do?
We do. We have 2 cabinets of beer glasses. Those are not even the ones we drink out of. We have 2 cabinets, like glass.
Right, and
cabinets.
And respectfully, from what I know about you guys and the way you travel, your glass collection is better than most. So, like, I could see how, in my opinion, it would be hard to. It's hard for me to go through and be like, all right, I don't want this one anymore. Like, I almost need to put the ones I really don't want aside, and then just let the lady just come in and just walk away with them. because it's got, so it must be really hard for you guys, because again, you guys got foreign pieces. You got ones that you literally went to the brewery overseas, and so those get sentimental value going on.
Some of them do. We have been very good as of late. We try we're saying a picture is worth 1,000 words, so we're trying not to bring home glasses as much. I also have a favorite whiskey glass. So, and we have given a couple of boxes away of pint glasses that, to, young friends of ours that are moving into their first apartments or doing those kind of things and don't have any beer glasses. One of my friends served me a beer in a plastic tumbler once. And I said, next time I went to her house, I brought her a case of pint glasses. Just said, here, you can have these. Don't ever serve beer in a plastic tumbler ever again. There are some special ones. We have some of breweries that no longer exist. Those will not go anywhere unless they get broken.
Right.
And I have some favorite beers that we do, but we're trying to be good. We don't have room for anything else.
I know. At some point, you just gotta cut bait. You really do. So, let me get back. So, you and Owen started your. You guys were. Let's get back to the your homebrew store. So then, after you guys had your homebrew store, at some point, we moved on and we sold it. Because I remember Owen telling that story, and I'm pretty sure everybody else, or whoever saw Owen told that story. So then, I know it's not immediate, but then you guys transitioned to beer festivals, And the one that really intrigues me the most is the cask Atlanta Cask Ale. Atlanta Cask Ale
Cask Ale
Festival.
tasting.
Yeah.
That one is a very special one. That one evolved, and it's interesting because in recent years, that festival has actually spoken to our Classic City Festival, because prior, our first festival was Classic City. Owen and his the partner in the homebrew shop, Paul, went to Great American Beer Festival. This would have probably been 1995, 1994. Went to the Great American Beer Festival. This is before we were started judging commercial. We were judging homebrew, but we hadn't started judging commercial beer. But they went just to attend. They both came back with this idea of this festival, and Owen's like, "I want to do a festival like the Great American Beer Festival." And I'm like, "Okay, all right. Let me know what you want to get done." And it was basically a keg and bottle festival, which is great. And it started out. It got huge. And it got too huge. We changed venues, made it small, because we're into educating people about beer, not just drinking as much as you can get your hands on, which when people go to festivals, you have two types of people. You have the people that are going to seek out the things they've never had and they want to try. And then you have those that go, I'm going to have all of it as quickly as I possibly can. And we want it to be more on the ends of the people. No, we don't mind, enjoy yourself, have fun. That's what a festival is. But we're also about educating people about beer. We want you to appreciate the beer. And if you're slugging every sample you get, you're really not going to do that. So we made it smaller. Then we were the first festival in the Southeast. I know we were the first festival in Georgia. I'm pretty sure that was the first festival in the Southeast. Came closely behind with the Decatur Beer Festival. I think was the second in Georgia. There started to be an influx of beer festivals. And we're to the point where it got really saturated. You could almost go somewhere to a beer festival every weekend. It got harder to sell tickets. We also ended up with a lot of beer left over. So ours is a charity festival. When we had it big, we actually had 4 charities. When we scaled it back, to 1, just because the money wouldn't divide as well amongst that many. But and our current charity is for Classic City is Athens Area Humane Society, and for ACAT it's the Atlanta Humane Society. But it actually, because of ticket sales and people wanted new stuff, because beer drinkers, we want all the new stuff, and we want to try different things. That was actually the draw of ACAT. ACAT, and I'll talk a little bit more about ACAT in a second, because that one is near and dear to my heart for many reasons. What you get at ACAT are usually one-offs or beers that brewers are experimenting with to put on. And so you get a bunch of different stuff. And so we ended up going to that format for Classic City as well. So now when you come to Classic City, you're going to have all cask, with the exception of our local breweries all get a keg station. So that means our local Athens area breweries, of which now we have, let's see, Southern, Normaltown, Academia, Terrapin, Authentic. I think we're up to 5 locally. And so they get their own keg station, as well as they can enter a cask as well. And I do prefer cask ale. I'm a huge fan of cask ale.
Woo!
So you've had cask ale, right?
I absolutely love it.
Okay, good. A lot of people still go, and I'm surprised with as many venues around that actually have discovered it. I'm surprised that more people haven't had it. Atlanta Cask Ale came out of our many trips to England. We have friends over there. We probably go at least once a year. And Owen's usually there more than that, with other groups and stuff when I'm working. But we spend a lot of time in the UK. And a lot of it, although it has some wonderful things as far as the country and the beauty, the countryside and all that, cask ale is huge. And it is a classic style of drink. If you don't know what a cask is, for those that might not, it's basically a delivery system. So as a home brewer, you would bottle condition your beer. Well, unless you keg it. But if you bottle condition your beer is going to carbonate naturally because you put a little bit more yeast in the bottom. The fermentable sugars, the yeast eat that and they make bubbles. The cask does the same thing. It just does it in a slightly larger container. In England, most of them are pump pulled. So they're gravity pulled, by pump up into a spout. You can also have them where they sit on the bar which is the way ours are done. And it's a gravity fed where you just turn on the spigot and you pour your beer that way. So it's a lightly carbonated version of beer. And what you get is you can actually taste the beer, not just that carbonation, that foam that kind of tickles your tongue. And it actually is a living beer. So it's constantly changing. Now, they don't last as long either. But over 3 or 4 days that you can have a cask on, that beer changes a little bit. You'll know when it's bad and needs to come off. But usually, especially in England, most of the time the cask is long empty before that ever happens. But it also is part of our love for just classic English beers. So your classic bitters, your summer ales, your old ales, your English barley wines, your porters, your stouts, winter warmers, all of those things are very classic style of beer, and they just taste better coming out of this lightly carbonated container. And that's where ACAT came. Owen's like, I want to do a cask in Georgia. And I'm thinking, okay, we can't do it during the summer. You know how hot it gets here?
Right.
Because you have to keep them cellar temperature. 55 degrees is the optimum temperature for a cask. Not warm, which is a misnomer. And to do that in Georgia, which is why we have that festival in the wintertime, because although we have had 75-degree days in January, most of the time it is manageable to keep the beer cool when we do it. So, and I love ACAT for 2 reasons. One, we have a judging of the beer. So the judges get around, we tap the cask in the morning, and we have a bunch of judges, and we actually judge the beer. And a lot of the beer comes from Georgia. We do allow other people around to enter beer as well, but we like to represent our Georgia peeps and kind of a rotation. We have so many breweries now, we can't get them all in one festival anymore.
Wow.
So, which is a good problem to have, and I hope we still have that after all of this is over. But but we judge it, and judging beer, that aspect of it is actually, next to drinking it, is one of my favorite things to do. So, and then you get to, go enjoy the festival, and then a couple hours before the festival's over, they announce some winners, and sort of like GABF on that Saturday morning after the medal round, everybody's running to everybody that won because they want to try that beer. But it's a fun festival, and it's really low key, and we know all of our pourers. We get all of our friends that are in the beer community pour for us, and it's a fabulous, fabulous thing. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Owen touched on this too, and I'm a big fan of cask ale. The Great Taste of the Midwest here is is a big brew fest. I can see that you're familiar with it. They started a couple years ago having just a cask ale tent, and it's the first tent. Well, it's the first tent that I hit, but it's the first tent that, like, when you come in, if you go straight, it's right there. And Kerri, I literally spend like the first hour and a half of that beer fest there, and it's just like this, and I can't leave it because it's so good. And like it's what you said before. It's because the brewers they take, well, up here they take, one of their main styles, maybe their flagship, and just throw a whole bunch of like mosaic in it when it doesn't have mosaic normally, or they throw a whole bunch of, you know what I'm saying? And they do these weird things, and they're just so fantastic and great, and they're one-offs, and you can't really get that anywhere. I mean, you're not going to get that anywhere. You're not going to get the taste anywhere, and you're certainly not going to get it, at your local, beer distributor or anything in a can. So the uniqueness of it makes it, in my opinion, it just makes it. And also, I think that the brewers, especially in your case, where there's a contest, but I really believe that the brewers really want to showcase something different when they're doing cask ale. And even if it's just like a place where they have like one pump, and you go in there, and every month or every month. Every week they have a different one.
Yeah.
It's really, really nice to go in there and just. So I would suggest if people aren't familiar with it, and it has that signature pump. So like if you have had a cask ale and you walk into a bar or a brewery, you can tell immediately if they have cask because you start to look for that pump. If you see that pump, I always ask for a little taste, or if and that's how I think that's how I think you really get into it, because people are used to lagers at like -1 degree, and you know what I'm saying, like crisp, and that's great, but as stout drinkers will tell you, the warmer your beer, sometimes the better they like it, and sometimes it brings out more of those flavors that the brewer is actually trying to accent when you let it warm up a little bit.
That is true, and it's not flat or warm. It's lightly carbonated when it's done correctly. I mean, you can mess up that. You can also over carbonate. We've had some exploding casks before, and that was brewer error. What do you mean I didn't need to put the corn sugar in there because I added a whole pound of cherries? Your cherries were your sugar. You didn't need the other. Our brewers don't make that many mistakes anymore because they've learned. The ones that learned the hard way will never make that mistake again because they had to dump a whole thing of beer. But yeah, it's neither warm nor flat. It's cellar temperature. It should not be over 60 degrees. But for me, as a beer drinker, the mark of a good beer, whether it's supposed to be cold or not, is that if it still tastes good when it warms up, that means that brewer did their job right. Because there's no off flavors, there's no weird aromas, there's no strange flavors. You're not getting any, because cold can hide a lot of sins, as well as alcohol. But a good test of a beer is just to let it warm up a little bit, and you can figure out how well the brewer knows their craft.
Right. I was going to say cocoa nibs too. That can hide a lot of flaws.
Cocoa nibs, hop. I mean, literally the right type of hop combination. If you put enough of it in something.
Yeah.
DMS? What DMS? I don't know.
Right. So, Kerri, it's time for us to talk about your favorite beer things.
Oh, my favorite beer things. I have to say, other than the beer itself, which I will talk about that in a minute, because obviously the consumption of the beer is part of the fun. I think looking back on my, almost, 26 years, 24 really in the industry, but 26 into beer. The one thing I have learned over time is the best people in my life, and a lot of our close friends, in fact, our oldest friends, we actually met through the homebrew store. But most of the best people that I have ever met, I met through beer. Whether it be at a festival, whether it be at a conference, whether it be just out at a pub, because I will talk to anybody. I love the people that are in craft beer because, yes, you're going to get your jerks everywhere. They exist. And alcohol does make you more of who you are. So some people are less fun to be around the more they drink. But I have had so few bad experiences with people when drinking beer that the people are one of my favorite things. You, for instance, I met you. And Owen had told me about you because you met him at a previous conference, but I wasn't able to go for a couple of years because of the scheduling. So in Montana last year, that was my first time being back, and I love it. And he wanted me to make sure that I met you. And I'm very glad he did because I love you. You're awesome.
Yes. I love you more than Owen. I love Owen.
But I do. People are fun. They're open. They like to talk ideas. They tend not to be judgmental. They tend to be curious about different regions. I mean, because most of us, when we can, we travel. Some more than others, but it's still, it's one of those things where you can share those experiences and talk about, oh yeah, I had that stout. Oh my God, it was horrible. But you know what? I went back a month later and they actually fixed it. So for me, beer has become my community. Those are my people. That's my tribe. And I'm loving the fact that we are slowly fixing some issues. We've had some gender issues within the craft beer community. It has been a very male-centric craft for a while, at least in the States. When I first started judging homebrew competitions, I was probably say there are 50 judges, I was probably maybe one of 2 or 3 females. First time I ever judged the Great American Beer Festival, which I have now judged, I think, about 7 or 8 times. They had to split the women among the men. There's usually only one woman at a table because there were not enough of us to go around. The last time I judged GABF, I actually sat at 3 different flights. I sat at a table with all women. We're starting to get a hold of some of those less funny beer labels that are discriminatory. The other thing I like is that we are starting to see more diversity ethnically within the beer community. There are a number of Black-owned breweries now. There are more writers. There are more voices. And the more voices we have from every community just makes the community stronger. Because it's that different input. That's why we travel. We were traveling. We were doing beercations before beercations were cool. And people were like, "Why are you going there?" Well, the beer. Why else would be going there? Oh yeah, we're going to sightsee a little bit, but yeah, we're going for beer. So one of my things I love about traveling is I get to meet new people, and I get to take out of my comfort zone. We went to Turkey. We went to Istanbul, which was a bucket list trip for me because I wanted to see the Hagia Sophia. We found craft beer in Istanbul, and talking to the people there, it was out of my comfort zone because I actually did not know how we would be accepted. Because you hear stories, you hear all sorts of stuff, but I found that people were just as passionate about a lot of the same things as we are. They have amazing food, by the way. They also have wine, but we did find some craft beer. Some of it was good, some of it wasn't, but it's the people that make the beer, and it's that combined knowledge that makes the community stronger. So that's probably my most favorite thing. But the beer, come on. I mean, my favorite style, and I've been having trouble finding it lately, are IPAs, specifically West Coast traditional IPAs.
What?
I am a hotbed of all.
That's why
I went from Samuel Adams to Guinness. I think my first hoppy beer was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. And we went to a brew pub that had an IPA, and I'm like, well, what's an IPA? And the guy's like, this is before I knew anything. And he goes, well, it's like a pale ale. He goes, you know what a pale ale is? I said, well, yeah, that's Sierra Nevada. He goes, well, this is like a pale ale, only more so. And at that point, there began my love for hops. And I am very sad because although to each their own, I try not to be a judgmental human. But I'm getting very tired of ordering an IPA and have it coming out looking like orange juice and tasting like sugar. And that is an opinion. It is my opinion. But West Coast IPAs are probably one of my favorite styles. Also, German Doppelbocks.
Ooh.
And you notice I'm sticking in the classic styles. I like brewers when they play with beer, as long as it's a one-off. But
Doppelbock.
Good Doppelbock. You can't play with a good Doppelbock. I mean,
no, you can't find one either.
Well, all right, you got to go to Germany. You can. There are a few of them out there, but they are harder to find.
Yeah. Especially now, especially like right now in the summer. I find them they pop up more in the winter for sure, I think.
Well, in Germany it is a winter beer. Like right now, you can find My Box. One of our local breweries, in fact, did I think this is their second year doing it. Creature Comforts did a collaboration with Burial, which is out of North Carolina. They're national, and they do a Maibach, which is a spring version of that style. which tends to be lighter in color. It's still pretty potent as far as the malt and the alcohol goes.
Mm-hmm.
But theirs has a little bit more hops than you would normally have, but I don't mind that at all. But the diversity of beer and the creativity of brewers boggles my mind sometimes. And sometimes I wish they wouldn't do some of the things that they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then again, I've had some creations that I didn't think I would like that worked.
Right.
So one of our winners, one of our first, it wasn't the first year, because the first year ACAT, the gold medal winner, was actually a blonde Bock from Savannah Brewing Company, which no longer exists, made by the first female brewer in Georgia. Gentry Han, whom she's a wonderful human. And she won with a blonde mild, which is a very classic English style of beer. But the following year, I believe it was the following year, the judges, because we did a smaller judging back then, fewer judges. We had a beer that came through, and if you looked at the description, you're going, oh my God. Now this was back in like 97, 98, maybe a little bit later than that. So pastry stouts weren't a thing yet. We had really good imperial stouts, but pastry stouts were not a thing. Moon River out of Savannah, John Pinkerton, the brewer there, and one of the owners, entered a beer. Of course, at the time while we were judging, it was blind, so we didn't know who had made it. Entered a beer that it was a porter with chocolate glazed donuts and coffee. And it was a coffee donut porter. That was the name of it. That was the style that we were given.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried, because there were tons of good beer. And we really tried eliminating it. We did not want that beer to win because it's like, this is a train wreck. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. The flavors were so well balanced and it was so good. We couldn't stop drinking it. So it ended up winning first place. And when I went to congratulate John on his win, he goes, it was a joke. He goes, he and his assistant brewer were like, what can we do with this beer? He goes, let's put some coffee in it. Okay, but we got to do more than that. So they literally went out and got, I think, chocolate glazed Krispy Kreme donuts and put it in the beer. But I don't know, however he did it, it worked. They won. It was delicious.
Wow.
So that creativity, that's fun, because you never know what you're going to get.
No, and I believe too that creativity is keeping many of them alive, and it's not necessarily in the recipes, but it's in whatever they're doing as far as food pairing, curbside, and I've seen some different things going on here in Madison as far as tweaking their business plan and all that, their business models, just being able to go to delivery or whatever they're trying to do, just to transition that way. And it's funny because I look at breweries this way, Kerri. I look at them as young and innovative. So when they're not, or when they're archaic, or when they, we've seen some of them. I don't know about you, but we've seen some of them do some dumb things here during COVID. We've seen some dumb things, as far as the civil unrest go. And when I mean by dumb, I mean you have a business. So your business at the end of the day is to make money. So by putting inflammatory things out there, it really doesn't help your bottom line. So, but I always love to say the exception proves the rule. So though a lot of them are the exception, meaning, most of our breweries are doing what they can, great people, not trying to make waves. And so I see that too from here. Another thing I want to mention too is that my lady, Michelle, she talks about, her thing is that, especially during COVID and around here, she said, I don't want to eat anywhere besides a brewery. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, first of all, the places. So she'll go and get curbside, or I'll say, hey, I want some vintage beer, and she'll go look at the menu. And she's like, okay, so why don't we just, I'll go grab it, and we can get some, we get some food there. So we've been eating, the majority of places that we eat out are breweries, for sure. during COVID, and they've all been very, very well. They've all been great. Now, some of the restaurants that we gotten, there's been some subpar things, and it even comes down to, I don't know, my Michelle has to leave for work, so when she leaves for work, and it's just easier for her to do some of these curbsides. So generally, she's the curbside lady. Long story shorter, she reports back that these breweries are on point as far as their curbside. She doesn't want to open her window. She doesn't want to touch. She doesn't want any transactions. She wants it contactless. She wants you to put it in her, in the trunk, or if you put it on the table and then leave and she can come. She likes that. She tells me that these breweries have it down, and these restaurants don't. They want to try to give you a receipt. Like, no, I don't need a receipt. You were just in my trunk. Put the receipt in my trunk. Like,
yeah, so, right.
right. But it shows you. But we and her talk about it. It shows you again. I believe the thinking that it is to be a brewery. Like, I think that they think on a different. I won't even say level. I just think they think differently than a restaurant owner or anything that I can't pinpoint it. And we've been talking about this for a while on COVID, because every time we go get brewed, we went yesterday. She's like, these guys are great. They were on point as far as like they weren't. I didn't feel like you're too close to me. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, but like I think it speaks to what we're talking about, which is breweries have that. Again, most of them have that ingenuity built in or something.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things. I think there's a community spirit.
Okay.
If you're, and most, yes, there are some good big breweries out there that probably aren't working on such a narrow profit margin that can do more. But I've noticed with especially our Georgia breweries, that the ones that have been able to, we've had a couple that have made hand sanitizer. They've fitted their equipment, done some hand sanitizer before they were actually selling beer to go. They've reached out to the community. They want their community to feel safe, because for most of these places, you get a lot of this, you get your regulars in on a regular basis. You are a part of that community. And if we're talking about a place that's not corporate owned, that your community is your livelihood. Also, I think brewers have a different way of looking at things, because you homebrew, correct? Have you done some homebrewing, Greg?
I've away brewed. Does that make sense? I've never brewed at my house. I've brewed plenty of places with my friends, but never at my house.
Yeah, but you know the process.
Oh yeah.
The biggest thing, and I always joke about this because people have asked, well, why don't you open a brewery? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? I'm like, no, because I like going to them. And I don't want to be a full-time sanitation person, because that is the brewery mindset. Because if you don't want your beer to be destroyed, unless you're making a crazy wild beer or a foeder beer or, a lambic style or something like that, cleanliness is a big deal. And anything that comes into that brewery or goes out of that brewery with your beer can affect product. Also, your regulars or your community, so they think, especially, and I think locally owned restaurants, if you're getting from, because I'm a part of a couple different groups just to get away from some of the news occasionally. And I see people who go to some of the bigger corporate restaurants for curbside, and they're having more negative experiences than those going to mom and pops or going to brew pubs. Also, a lot of the breweries have outside space. So with some places opening up, you can reasonably stay safe if you're outside. They think about that, because as a brewery, they have to, because some breweries, have an open plan. Some are more restrictive as far as who they let back in the brewery and stuff. But their mindset is about cleanliness and keeping that beer clean and fresh and good, and supporting their community, who they're the ones that are going to be coming back afterwards. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And I agree. I think that breweries do it better, especially if they are small, because they know that is their lifeline.
Right. And there's a thin margin there too. Not that there's not in restaurants. It's not, not that there's not. I don't really want to compare them. And then that was my latest compare. But you know what I mean? There's different, obviously there's different forces of working. But breweries have come on to the board though, Obviously within the past couple decades, of course, and now there's a lot of breweries. Kerry, this is something. One last point, and I'll let you go. But this is something that is really really interesting too about the brewery industry is that especially a couple years ago. I don't know if it's so much now, and I'll let you speak to it. But a couple years ago, it used to be a dig to go into a brewery and say, "Oh, the food is better than the beer," or you say, "Hey, how did you like atwaterbrewingcompany.com, whatever." And you go and you say, "But the food is really good." That would be like, whoa! I went to a brewery. I'm expecting, I don't want to hear about your food. I want to hear about your beer. You know what I mean? So it used to, when I first came into craft beer, it used to be kind of like a slam to be like, "Oh yeah, they got good food, right." But now I think it's I think it's a total different beast, and I think people literally look at breweries now as places to eat and beer. And I believe, again, I think that's a sea change. I think it has a lot to do with a lot of things, but a lot of people end up being foodies too. I'm a beer guy. I'm a foodie too, so I'll eat anywhere. But the lady's a foodie, so then she's not a beer drinker, so she's more of a cocktail drinker. But we can both enjoy the brewery experience. I just said we even enjoyed the brewery curbside experience. As much as so I don't know if you want to speak to the whole because do you remember that area, or do you remember when people say, "Hey, their food is good," and it's kind of like almost big to their beer?
Yeah, and back in early on in Georgia breweries, where the beer was sometimes hit or miss, because it was a new thing, there wasn't as much competition. That I think that sometimes to kind of boost sales, some breweries either had a food truck, which I love. I love the idea of that cross community stuff. Food trucks are amazing. We have some really great ones in Atlanta. Athens, we have a couple of good ones, but Atlanta's got some fabulous food trucks.
Sure.
And then the ones that are operating as brew pubs that have their own kitchen that can serve food. The thing about the brew pub, and this is everyone I've known that has opened one, the food is very important because most beer drinkers are going to come in for the beer. And your beer needs to be on point, don't get me wrong. Because if I go enough, and I may come in for a meal and a beer one night, but then one night I may come in doing a pub crawl or something, and I just want a pint. And if you don't have good beer, I'm not going to stick around that long. But brew pubs, I've always been told that the food has to be as good as the beer, because people bring in, like your significant other, have to bring people in that are not necessarily beer people.
Right.
That's why a lot of them also offer like a wine if they can have the licensing for that. You need to get your lady down to Georgia, because I have the perfect brewery for all of us. One of our local Georgia breweries, Dry County, which actually does some amazing beer. I love it. They're also doing their own spirits.
Oh, okay.
And they have a really good old fashioned that they do. They started canning a vodka drink that they do, which I've been told I prefer their beer, but but I've been told that it's pretty good. So that would be a thing. We have a lot more breweries doing spirits these days. So
yeah, and again, breweries have taken up their game, and that's science too. Kerry, is it's science. If you eat, you're going to spend more on beer, and you're going to spend more time at that place, which means you're going to spend more time on beer, which means that your tips are your potential tips are going to go up. So meaning people get paid more. I mean, it makes sense for you to have beer, but it makes sense for you to have food, but food is a pain in the butt, and I don't want, with all due respect, I do not want my brewmaster near anywhere in my food. Sorry. Right.
Well, the brewmaster doesn't want to be anywhere near it. He doesn't want, especially if they have like pizzas and stuff like that, where there's a completely different yeast.
Yeah. Oh.
Because baker's yeast and beer,
don't
go.
No,
it's a nasty combination. So I think you're pretty safe. Most brewers, unless they're going to get a pint of, unless they're grabbing themselves a pint behind the bar or a snack, or as some of my brewers sometimes do, they raid the spice cabinets of their chefs. I don't think most of the brewers want to be anywhere near the kitchen either.
No, and I don't want them there either. By the way, I don't, and also not to be rude, I generally don't want them behind the bar. Too. I generally don't want them behind the bar too, but that's enough story.
I don't mind them being behind the bar only because I used to know all the brewers. I don't know all the brewers anymore. There's too many breweries.
Yes.
But I like hanging out with my people, so it's kind of fun touching base if they have a minute to be able to touch base and talk about the latest thing they're brewing. But
right, but come around the bar, come around to my side, have a seat. Like I just see sometimes my experience sometimes with brewers when they're serving is that like sometimes I feel that they don't want to be there, and it's cool. I don't want you to be there. I want you to come around on the side because I'm probably a bigger brewmaster junkie than you are. I want to talk to all of them. I love it, junkie or whatever, groupie or whatever. Like again, if I know a brewer's near me, I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to say hey, or I'm going to try to get my opinion. I'm that guy. I'll be nice about it, but I still be that guy to be like, hey man, that's great. So I'm the first one that wants to do that. But
if you have the brewer behind the bar because they have to be there, then that brewery is probably not making enough money to have the right staff, and that probably means there's probably something wrong with the beer to begin with.
Could be for sure. So, Kerri, that's a great place to stop. Or unless you have anything else that you want to talk about today, I'm not.
No, but this has been fun. I am thrilled.
Great. I don't know if you've heard my explanation before, but this is how I'm getting through COVID is by showcasing my friends to everybody, but also, as I've been saying before, I actually get to communicate with my friends. So in order for me to book this to you, I had to talk to you. Sometimes I have to call people, sometimes I email, but just that back and forth of at least communicating with my friends is something that I have to get through because I was all up in Owen's girl earlier in this about how, or no, or it was before we started. I was asking, right? It was before we started about how I was asking how Owen is dealing with it because he's a guy who obviously travels a lot. He's a very social guy. He's a very guy, out. So I'm like, how's Owen dealing with it? Well, this is how I'm dealing with it.
Hey,
so I want to thank you.
Works. I appreciate it because between the two of us, I'm the more extrovert.
Oh.
He's more of an introverted extrovert. I am to an extent, but I have missed being around people because my batteries are a little overcharged. So we've done some Zoom sessions, and we have done some social distance kind of stuff, but it's not quite the same when you can't hug people and you can't, I want you to try this beer. Oh, wait a minute. Let me wipe off the top with the hand sanitizer. And, it's just not the same.
Right. And I haven't been.
I love that you're doing this, but don't be a stranger.
No, I'm here. I'm here. We're gonna keep doing it until COVID, or we're gonna keep doing it for a lot of things I want to. I always talk about, especially on this, where a lot of people talking about beer, is that I want to see a lot of breweries continue some of the things that they're doing during COVID after, and I need to apply that to myself. So I started this because of COVID, but I need to continue to do it and continue to reach out to my friends, have the virtual Zooms, even if I'm not, going out. I think there's some things that we've learned through COVID that we can, use to keep ourselves, attached, even if we're not, even if it's like, doldrums of winter. Sometimes in the doldrums of winter up here, I don't know about down there, but up here, I'm like, I ain't going out. All right. So do a stream or do a virtual, setting with your family, or so I think there's things that we could take from it. And again, one of the things I need to take from it is to continue to talk to my friends, and my friends are amazing. And that's why when you look at Meet My Friends, this is all on YouTube. If you look at them all these crazy people that call me my friend, it becomes at some point, what's the word I want to use? Overwhelming, because I'm like, damn, I got great friends, and look at everything they're doing, and I'm just sitting here doing a vlog or something. So.
Hey, what you're doing is great. Everybody has their niche, and I have to say I have been bad. I need to be writing, but obviously I've had some health things going on and other things, but and I'm kind of sporadic anyway because I miss my people. But no, I think everyone you got to do what you got to do for you, and help people when you can, and Like I said, the beer community is a fabulous community and a way to draw support. And I thank the beer community for knowing people like you. So.
Oh, thanks. And for everybody knows too, Kerri, Kerri's also a teacher, so she went through this whole, upheaval of, school and all that too. So she's not looking for any accolation. I'm giving her the accolation on that because I want to give exactly the word I want to use. But no, I want to shout out to all the teachers again. As a homeschool dad, I understand that this year was just crazy. Not everybody's supposed to be homeschooled. Not everybody wants to. Not everybody's suited for that, whether it be teacher, whether it be parent, whether it be kid. So just another shout out to all of our teachers on top, you and everybody who's doing everything they can to keep the kids educated and keep sane. Yeah. So Kerri, I hope I hope the best for you guys. I will, we'll see each other hopefully.
I hope soon.
If everything is good, Owen has really been Owen's awesome. He has a way of, and you probably already know this, he has a way of being very subtle about when he's putting pressure on you. I don't know if that makes sense. He's not like a guy.
Very good at it. I'm very aware.
Yeah, right. He's not. I don't think he's like a push. He's not like your normal come on, dude, come on, dude. But he says these subtle little things to you, and it's just man, it almost crushes shit. So I'm gonna get to the Atlanta Cast Fair because he's like, man, I just don't believe that you haven't been down here yet. I think it was something like that, and I was like.
He's like a Joe Obama. He works the guilt, and you don't even know he's doing it. And to give him credit, he's had practice because for the last 26 years, he has been dealing with the most bullheaded alpha female ever. So, in order for him to get things through, he's gotten very good at those subtle tactics.
Sure.
He's a very calm human anyway, though.
And again, he delivers it well. And then again, it's not he just delivers it and he moves on. And you're just I'm just dude, I can't even move on because I'm still trying to
that seed has been planted.
But he really has, as for Owen, has forwarded on about the Atlanta Cascade Festival. So that's going to be something that
you need to.
If we can clear this, if we can I almost feel like it's a blowing your nose. If we can blow our nose of 2020 and 2021 is going to start, I'm probably going to be there. I'm not.
We would love to see you. That would be absolutely awesome.
I'm probably going to be there. So, Kerri, hopefully January. Let's start there. Hopefully January.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
And I want to thank you for showcasing yourself. I want to thank you for the conversation. I told my family that it would probably be an hour, and every time I do that, it's an hour and a half. So I coached this, and it's great. But that's when the conversation's good, and everybody's engaged and people are watching. So thank you again.
Well, appreciate it. Thank you so much, Greg. It's been fun.
Cheers. Well, I'll see you in January. I'm gonna keep that. We're gonna stay positive, and yeah, that's it. See you in January.
All right. See you in January.
Yes. Look at that. It works. Thanks, Kerri. So see you in January. Yes. Look at this. That's the first event that I was I don't know. I think I can make that one. All these things in the fall, I'm not sure. The summer is. I just hope everybody can get back to, especially our breweries, but I hope restaurants, everybody can get back to as much normalcy as can, and we can save a lot of our breweries and restaurants. Because I don't know how long we can sustain 50% or 25% or only outdoors or only curbside. Something's gonna have to break there. So I'm hoping it's soon. So yes, we are. Again, thanks, Kerri, for that conversation. It was great. So on Friday, we have a big show. We have Afro Beer Chick and Aaron Govea. These two internet beasts, is that a good word? These two internet, they have big internet followings, and they both went viral for different reasons. And so it's going to be fun talking to him about going viral. And actually, one thing I want to ask him is, and I got to remember this so I don't forget because there are a lot of things going on, is how do they deal with bots? How do you know if you're being trolled by like a bot. Like, how do you know that, and how do you know to respond? And so I'm gonna ask them both, and it's gonna be fun. Doug will be back with me for that, and I will see you guys then. I was drinking a. This beer is really, really good. I was surprised. I'd never had it before, and I'm not surprised because the brewery's good, but I'm surprised that I liked it so much. Which was the Session IPA from Delta Beer Lab. Fantastic. It was a light drinker. I don't know. I was having a conversation here, but if I had another one, I would have drank another one here. But it's back by the refrigerator. So all right. I will see you guys on Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, for Brothers and Brews with Afro Beer Chick and Daddy Files, Aaron Govea. It's going to be a fun time, and I will see you guys then. Time for dinner. Cheers.